talk. We now have shaping the future of M&E in today's digitalized and information-driven economy. To tell us more, I would like to invite the moderator, Mr. Pranjal Sharma, economic analyst and author, India Automated. Mr. Pranjal, the panel is all yours.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining this special session. I think this is a sector which is, very, very to our lives, even in normal times. But I think in these extraordinary times, it's playing an even more important role. And also the fact that this sector has been in a throes of transformation, again, before COVID, with the digital revolution and the fourth industrial revolution, but COVID has intensified it in several ways. It has changed it in positive and negative ways. So I think we have a lot to unpack in this session. I'm going to begin right away by inviting Mr. Amit, Khare, Secretary, Information and Broadcasting Ministry, to give his address. Post that, we will have industry experts who you all know to share their thoughts. I think the key concern, of course, is regulatory and policy issues, where can we look at a harmonized approach to this industry while the industry itself is changing? Can the policy and how can the policy actually change itself to keep pace? And can we make sure that at a time when we are focusing a lot on India's own strengths, how do we capitalize on the legacy advantages that this sector has? So, Mr. Khare, may I invite you to share your address, please?
Thank you very much. It is really nice to be with Vicky Frames again, rather E-Frame. I was there with you last year. And digital, or the present situation, which has really pushed the digital interaction much more. Well, there was some discussion in the previous session. There are some advantages, disadvantages. But primarily, if I look from my viewpoint, 15 minutes ago, I was interacting with the directors of various IITs all over India. And now I'm interacting with the industry leaders here. So a great jump is there. You can be at different places at different points of time, interacting with different people. But yes, the emotions that are expressed across the table are missing. And definitely M&D industry does work on the emotions. Now, without going or taking much time about the way industry has changed. In fact, in the morning, I was just thinking about the past. We had a Murphy radio in our house. And then I think there is no Murphy now and no Bush transistor. And slowly it got changed to very small devices which came from Japan. And now, say around 40 years later, we again are back to the digital radio. So evolution is there. And in any society, there will be, once it develops, there is need for information, there is need for entertainment, there is need for furthering of knowledge. And no wonder this digital experience that we are having now, and which we had before COVID also, has been of great help. In fact, if we want to maintain old records, if we want to maintain the scriptures which are there, or the diversity of India, nothing better than to have them on digital platforms. Now, with this background, one question which is quite often asked to us in the ministry, that what is the role of the ministry of I&B in the area of M&E? Well, one, as a regulator, but second, and perhaps even more important, the emerging role is that of a facilitator. Regulatory regimes, as mentioned by Mr. Pranjal, I mentioned this in the last session also when I was present with you, that unfortunately in our country, the regulatory regimes have developed as per the platforms. So first came the print media. So we had the press council. It has a separate type of regulation. Then we had the All India Radio at the same time, almost at the same time, they have a different structure. For example, FM radio are not permitted to have news other than that of AIR. Television developed on a different line altogether. And in television, there is no pre-censorship, but post-production. If there is violation of the code, they have certain regulatory structures. Film, of course, they require prior certification. So if we take broadly, and the fifth, the emerging media, the OTT platforms, they don't have any regulation as of now. So for 5 different media, that is print, radio, television, films, and the OTT platform, 4 of them are having different type of regulatory practices. Some are self-regulated, some are pre-regulated, some are post-regulated, and one of them is unregulated. But when it comes to the content and how it is delivered, in the present days, everything is converging. What we used to call as different media earlier. Now the same thing which when it appears online, in newspaper, if it is printed, it will be subject to PCI regulations. But on the other hand, if it is an online edition, it cannot be subject to PCI because it is not printed. Similarly, if a film is exhibited on an OTT platform, it will not be subject to the Central Board of Film Certification because it is not being exhibited as a film there. If we take a TV program or TV news, they also have a different system. Now, what the ministry is trying, and let us be very clear, instead of bringing everybody to the lowest common, the attempt is to have more freedom to all of them. We must try to regulate or rather facilitate all the sector. There is definitely a need for a level playing field amongst the different media. But level playing field will not mean that we bring everybody under a very heavy regulatory structures. In fact, the entire last 6 years of the present government has been focused on ease of doing business and on having less regulation, less regulation, but more effective regulation. As because I'm also looking after HRD nowadays. So there we have developed this concept of having a light but tight regulation. Instead of having 200 rules or clauses, if we have 4 of them and ask that you better comply with all them, rather than having a plethora of acts and rules and subordinate legislations without having the desired result. So the first point which I would like to mention here is the different regulatory structures. They need to be brought in sync with each other, but not to impose more regulation, but rather to liberate them, have less regulation, but more fine-tuned, more easy to implement and to have effective results. The second, particularly in the field of, say, radio, community radio, or the films, there the role of the government has to be as a facilitator. We do have small corporation like the NFDC, and we have the Prasar Bharati is autonomous, of course, supported by the Government of India. But the role of the government will be more of a facilitator. For example, if films are being shot, how can we help them, assist the producers or the directors in getting clearances, in having a single window permission, in expediting their clearances or whatever post-production or pre-production issues that they have. So the film corporation, the NFDC, has developed a single window, and pre-COVID it had done well. In fact, some of the foreign film producers, they got clearances within 10 or 11 days to even shoot with a helicopter in front of Gateway of India. And when they went back to US, they appreciated the efficiency with which the central and the state governments worked. So this is the second role which I envisage for the government is to act as a facilitator in the field of M&D. A third role which has now emerged post-COVID is also that of an educator. In fact, if you link HRD with INB, you would observe that a huge number of platforms have come up for online education. And in fact, this sector can very easily transform the India's education. Particularly, there are issues of connectivity of devices, but at least in the urban areas where we do have these systems, or at least in the premier institutions where we have the devices, where we have the connectivity, the entire education and the M&D sector can work together to educate the youth of this country. Some pertinent issues which FICCI had raised with the ministry, and the Honorable Minister had also taken a meeting about the current issues or current problems that are being faced by the industry. I am happy to say that some of those issues relating to deferment of payment, etc., they have been approved by the Honorable Minister, and those orders are being issued. But as I said, our role is more of a facilitator, less of a regulator, and post-COVID, a little bit role of an educator. I'll stop here. I think it has been a good experience last year also, and maybe next year we may meet physically, at least those personal interactions which we used to have in FICCI frames. That would be there next year. With this, I wish all the best to FICCI, and thank you also for giving us this platform.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Khare. Would you have time for a quick question if I could take that with you?
I'm here with you till 1 o'clock.
Oh, excellent. So one quick question before I go to the panelist is the harmony between the various departments of the government, because as you said, because you hold the chairs in two very important ministries, you can perhaps bring them together, and you gave a great example of education and M&E working together. But if we look at the footprint across technology sector, we look at telecom sector, I think all of them have to be in the mix. So do you think a new framework can emerge from the government where all the various departments which are critical can come together to look at M&E in a holistic manner, rather than everybody looking at it in their own dimension?
I mean, you have raised a very important question. And any large organization, I mean, I've been thinking about it for a long time, that whether it is the government or any large organization, it has to be divided into bureaus and bureaucracy, as Max Weber said. But ultimately, at some point, they have to converge. COVID presented a good situation where the Prime Minister's office, they formed 11 different groups, where they tried to bring different ministries together. For example, logistics is one group. We can't say that a pandemic is just the responsibility of the health ministry, or education is the responsibility only of HRD. There are issues which have to be brought together. And as you rightly said about telecom, what happens to the AGR in telecom has to be applicable to the M&D sector. We can't have two different rates of AGR for telecom sector and for the M&D, say for the direct-to-home providers. So there is a need for convergence. The ministries, of course, have been structured, and as I mentioned about OTT, so OTT being a digital platform will fall under the purview of the Ministry of IT. But now we are proposing a decision that the content should fall within the purview of INB. So convergence of various ministries is extremely necessary, particularly in the changes that are coming not only in the country but also beyond. It is necessary to have a sort of a mission mode. Digital education will include, on one hand, the service providers, the connectivity, which of course is of a different ministry, the content which comes from, say, HRD or its institutes, and of course, the providers like Doordarshan, DD Free Dish platform, or any other Airtel or any platform, which actually sends that content to a far. All of them have to be brought together. It is the need of the hour. While the ministries will exist, because as I said, any large organization has to be divided into ministries or departments. But then at a certain functional level, these working groups which have been formed by PMO, these are the ones which will drive it in a mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khare. I think that's a very optimistic and encouraging thought from you. I think that kind of convergence and coordination is absolutely critical. Let me quickly go over to our panel and get some thoughts from them. Shekhar, I'd like to begin with you, please, since you are up in the mountains surrounded in clouds, and you said there are thunderstorms as well. But, you know, you are one of those who has seen, who probably has done editing of movies with scissors, you know, and now we are in a OTT and a digital format. What are the key challenges that you see today, and how do you think the industry must cope with them? I have a feeling that the lights went out just when I addressed Shekhar. So, you know, let me go across to come back to Shekhar as soon as possible, and when he comes back. Ajit, you know, there is a lot of change, and the company that you represent has changed not just India and not just one sector, but several. What are the key issues that you see in India which will, you know, make a difference in terms of making M&E industry far better? I think opportunities are tremendous, even before COVID, but what must be done to, you know, harness them in the best way possible?
Pranjal, I think there are three big things happening in my mind, Pranjal, and for me, all those three have come together for the world, but particularly in India, that in many ways frames the opportunity for the creative economy. One is, and I don't think we have recognized the extent of the transformation, is what's happened in the last 5 years, particularly in the last 4 years, in terms of the explosion in access to affordable 4G, and the 500 million people or so who have come online, who now can not just consume media, but create media as well. And any country has seen this kind of a transition in this faster period, not even China. And I don't think we have given enough kudos to that transformation, and probably in many ways not thought about what does that mean. So that's clearly one driver in my mind. I think the second is the particular role that creative platforms and creative vehicles play and has played in the last 5, 10, 15 years around the world, driven by technology, where what we have seen is there's clearly an element of massive democratization of expression that makes these vehicles an everyday habit for people, whether they're creating or consuming media. But equally, I think we have seen that in many ways, creative vehicles, including media, are now mass vehicles. They are serving almost everyone in the country. Now, that has implications for advertising and marketing, but more importantly, I think it has implication in terms of when you have mass vehicles like what television used to be, what digital platforms are today, it enables you to light up multiple sectors, whether that's education, healthcare. They provide the foundation for lighting up all kinds of segments and sectors. And for me, the third one is, as much as we have a healthcare crisis in the virus outbreak, and we continue to fight that as a country, and it's important to focus on that, it's also pretty clear that it's framed the importance of changes in consumer behavior, including the fact that a conference like this is happening in a new format. But I think it's just created in many ways, as much as it's a negative shock to the economy and to healthcare systems around the world, there's an element of realizing that there's a different way of doing things. So if I look at that, all of the work that we have done in the last 4 years in terms of lighting up mobile phones, a new mindset on the back of COVID, and now the emergence of mass vehicles, mass creative vehicles in digital, I do think there's a moment for India to look at this and say, what next for us? How do we leverage these three forces coming together, not all of which is happening globally? I think the fact that there are mass creative vehicles here is unique to us. And I think all of this happening in a country that values open democratic expression. I think that sets the stage for the creative economy to play a big role, not just in India, but around the world as well. Back to Pranjal.
Thanks, Ajit. I think that last point is very critical because I believe, and I say that at every fora possible, that India is the world's largest open market democracy, and there is no reason why we should not, feel and believe in it so strongly that we create structures for ourselves which perhaps are unique to us, and therefore I think some of the templates from the world we can learn from, but we really need to work on our own strengths and build on them. Karan, I'm going to come to you because you're an example of the new players which have come to leverage the creative economy that India has. You are a relatively younger player in the M&E space, but do you see companies like yours defining the future now?
Thanks, Pranjal. So yeah, I think we are certainly one of the newer entrants into the space, but we've grown pretty quickly. We are now, I think, the largest in India, and I think that as Ajit said, the really key thing here has been that the structural construct of how content is consumed has changed completely. There is no sort of almost no link to what it was in the past. New audiences have opened up. For example, we always looked at television audience as 900 million to a billion approximately by multiplying the 200 million TVs that we had with 4.5 people per household. And what that did was, yes, of course, it was an extrapolation. But today we are looking at, I don't know what the number is, it changes every month, but today I think we're looking at at least 400 million, if not more, actual individual addressable video consumers on mobile. So I think just the sheer market size that has opened up has been quite phenomenal. And what this has done is it's opened up a completely new audience that was earlier not really quite addressable or even really consuming what was happening on television, which was the mass medium of India. And as the secretary said, that I think we now need to get to a point where these structures get appropriately recognized. I think we Ajit and I on one of the FICCI committees together, and one of the things that came up the last time was that digital is no longer a sort of niche media or even a new age media anymore. 100% of the audience that anyone wants to reach out to in India is on digital. A small percentage of that is available on television or print. So I think that it's been a good journey till now. We've seen that in the kind of content that's being consumed, in the times it's being consumed, in the places it's being consumed, and MX with its scale has seen it all across the length and breadth of the country.
So that's, I think, important, Karan, because we should actually look at screens. In my view, what is important are screens. Look at the screens in hands of people, community screens, personal screens, family screens, and then see how consumption is occurring across. Earlier we just had the silver screen to talk about, but both with the OTT as well as smart TVs and mobiles, I think just the definition of what can be offered through a screen has really undergone a change, and I think that's happening much faster than we realize, and which is where I think the key challenge lies on how do you cope with this tremendous change. I'll go over to Punit now. Punit, your group and since I co-authored Subhashji's biography, I know that he has created the TV industry, private TV industry in India. Also has been very agile. Now your group straddles everything from movies to broadcast as well as OTT. Now, for a group like yours, and also in your position, Punit, what do you think are the key opportunities we should leverage? Mr. Khare talked about light touch regulation and some kind of cohesion which is to come through. In your view, what should define the growth of M&E industry in the future? You're on mute, Punit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So I'm due to a tech challenge using a mobile phone, but good that I'm still able to connect. Apologies, there was some challenge earlier. While I do represent Z in this forum, I also want to just share that I would like to just address Shri Khare as the chair on the broadcast committee of FICCI. And these are occasions that I wouldn't want to let pass. So may I use this opportunity to first thank Mr. Khare for the point he raised about the light touch regulation and what he sees as the role for government and regulators, because that is one of the key points that broadcasters have raised. And I do want to raise that on behalf of all broadcasters and thank him for that view. And we hope to see more action on that. Again, we have also talked about this whole conversation on getting infrastructure status for the industry. And I will come to your question, Pranjal, but I do want to share this with Mr. Khare. We've talked often of the infrastructure status for the entire broadcast as well as the entire distribution ecosystem, because that's what allows investments to come in and hopefully infrastructure leading to talent also wanting to come in. So that's something that we will be talking to you, sir, as we go forward. And the final point, and I think you did touch upon that as well when you were talking of education, how we can, from the industry side and along with help from the government, work on this whole ecosystem on talent coming into the industry. Because like all of us are talking about, there is an explosion of content consumption, which by extension means there's an explosion on content creation. And hence, how do we get the right kind of talent, the right volume of talent, and how do we broad base the industry so that there is a lot more places from which content can start to come in as well. So those are some things that I did want to raise as part of that committee on broadcast. But let me just come back to the question that you raised. And I'll share with you what we are thinking in the group. And that might be slightly different to the conversation we were having just now. See, I think the obsession with platform, the obsession with the mediums is something which I think is a very narrow view. And again, even at the cost of upsetting some, shall we say, long-held beliefs, let me just go ahead and make this a bit more lively on this conversation. You see, the world of content has focused on either the platform or the content creator. And in all that, one of the things which has got missed out and which now has to come front and center is who are you making it for? And let me step out of the content world and take another category which might just bring it to life what I'm trying to lead to. Let's take tea as a category. Tea is something we're all passionate about, right? It's like everyone's got their own way of having tea. And tea is emotion. It's really strong emotion, just like content is. And if you look at the product, you know, it gets served in many ways. You drink it at home, you drink it outside, you drink it in 5-star hotels. It's very different shapes and forms. But the big thing there is neither the product nor the platforms or the occasions where it's served. It's about who's the consumer. And if you build the ability to understand the consumer and what they are and who they are, and you know, we have so many languages, so many cultures, the sheer diversity makes it so important. And now you add to that the other variable that the same person behaves differently when they might be watching, let's say, on a mobile phone alone, or when they are on an aircraft, or when they are home in the family, watching television with the family. So I think that that's what I believe is a core shift for us in the industry, that how do we get, without compromise, obviously the primacy of content creator always will remain. How do we get this thinking of who you're making for, where they're consuming, and then add the creative power of the individual who's the creator to create great characters, great stories, great content, great news, and so on. So I think that's one thing which will, if we're thinking becoming 20 times the revenue, we'll first have to know the multiplicity and the complexity of the people who we are serving, and then figure out the complexity of the various platforms, and then the complexity of discovery and marketing and so on. So that's one thing which I think we in the group are at least wanting to obsess about.
Sure, Punit. So thanks. I think that's you made it very simple actually. Connecting the creator and the consumer, and everything else is a detail, important details. But I think creator and consumers have to be in touch in the best way possible. Shekhar is back with us. So Shekhar, we saw you go off, but you've seen the transformation from the time when you were probably editing movies with the scissors to OTT. How do you see the entertainment industry evolving? Do you think, there's some concerns about the way movies are being made or distributed. Of course, there is some concern that people are trying to hold it back and not allowing technology to go ahead and take root. Where do you see the industry right now?
Yeah, I'm going to speak very fast because I don't know if I'll go up again. So please forgive me.
Yes, but you can still stay on audio, in case we lose your video, you can still, all right.
I will do my best. So I think what Punit was saying is there's a very interesting thing he was saying. Here's what we've got to imagine. Technology is moving faster even than the content creators, established content creators can manage. Today, for example, we banned TikTok. It was a political ban. It wasn't anything to do. It was political censorship, and I'm not saying that was wrong. In about a month, we'll have Indian TikToks all over, right? You take one TikTok star, take the biggest TikTok stars, okay? Here's the issue. You take all the Indian stars, add all their social media up, take all the cricket stars, add all the social media up, and one huge TikTok star will have greater impact, greater reach than all of these people together. So everybody's watching TikTok. So how do you regulate TikTok? I forget regulation. How do we adapt as content creators to TikTok? And by the time we've adapted to TikTok, there's a new technology. And TikTok just crept upon us. Now there's a new technology. So one of the things as a content creator, I'm saying, and I think Punit's right, I'm a storyteller. Can I tell a story on TikTok? Can I tell a good story on TikTok? Can I tell a good story on OTT? OTT is actually not that different from what TV was. It's just you can binge watch, right? But there will be other technologies. There'll be technologies in OTT. I've just seen a technology where sitting at home, you can have an immersive experience. You can do a Mahabharat on OTT, but you can walk into Mahabharat. You can become a character in Mahabharat, and you can do it sitting at home and create your own story. And then another story within the story, and within the story. How do I, as a content creator, handle that? I'm used to film. There are only 11,000 theaters in India. Film is not as important as it used to be. And anyway, we used to say film is for the masses. How many people, even in the middle class, can actually afford to go see a film more than once a month or twice a month? Those ideas we've got to let go. We are storytellers, whether we make it on TikTok. So that is the creative aspect of me. The regulatory aspect is even more difficult, because once you regulate one platform, one technology, a new technology is taken over. Now you start regulating that. So let's say, TikTok was banned for the security of the nation. It has nothing to do with censorship and regulation, but it is regulation. Platforms are also regulation. So I'm just going to stop there and throw that out, that between entertainment and media, when we say entertainment and media, there are not two silos. It's one silo. It's all together. Education, more people go to YouTube for education than all the classes put together. Look at the kind of, we say, we'll give people educational experience of hands-on things. Just go to YouTube, see how many people in India do for education. Now, let's take that into account. So I'm just going to leave it there. I've opened the discussion out to say technology moves faster than regulation, but even faster than established OTT players. OTT is faster than storytellers. I'm a kind of a dinosaur. My fear is becoming a dinosaur. It's not like I won't be able to make films. Films may not be valid anymore. I need to keep learning and keep learning to tell stories, even in 30 seconds, on any platform that is available to me to reach out to the consumer of content.
Absolutely, Shekhar. That's brilliant because we haven't even seen. I think we're at the beginning of this information and digital era, and I can tell you that we have not even discussed things like augmented reality and virtual reality. Because then you will have more immersive experiences in media entertainment. Gaming is such an important aspect of media and entertainment as well. We haven't even touched the surface. So I think, as you said, the regulatory aspect has to be on certain principles rather than rules, so that you say, well, certain things are beyond acceptance, but everything else is open. I think that's the kind of approach which, as you say, will work very well. And I think what's also embedded in what you say is that industry needs to evolve very fast as well. You cannot force the government or other people to hold back. But let me come into
may I just one more thing.
Sure.
I work with MIT now, looking at new technologies. There are new technologies of storytelling, and what COVID has done, just as it's accelerated Zoom to new levels, it is also accelerating the idea of delivering to you over your device immersive technologies. Just what I was talking about.
Exactly.
So that acceleration has happened because of COVID, because there's a huge amount of investment going on in there. And I tell you, in a few months, we'll be amazed at what's offered to us. We won't even be able to, ये क्या होगा, ये कैसे होगा? अरे लेकिन सब बच्चे तो उसी के ऊपर बैठे हैं. ये क्या है? ये नई टेक्नोलॉजी क्या है? अब आप content create करो उसको. So for me, it's a constant learning. That's why I'm at MIT, to constantly learn. What is a new technology? How do I reach people? Because that's what I want to do. I want my stories to reach people.
So I think what what's going to happen is happening in part is the consumer also becomes a co-creator in some ways, and I think that's where we are headed. Girish, coming to you, we have to end at 1 sharp, so I'll come to you and then a quick response from Mr. Khare. Girish, your view on where we are headed. Of course, your strengths lie in news, but you've done several other things. But we'd like to know what you think about the discussion and the ideas thrown so far.
So after listening to Punit and Mr. Shekhar Kapoor and Mr. Khare, I realized that newspaper is the only regulated sector currently. Every Indian language newspaper. If you remember 15, 20 years back, people were saying that, okay, now since the news has come on television, who's going to read newspaper? But it has happened other way. In last 20 years time, there's been a growth of almost 11% CAGR in last 20 years time in the circulation of newspaper and readership also. Now think of, Mr. Khare, I would like to take this opportunity to ask you that in spite of all the regulation, if this sector is growing so healthily, so if government takes away the regulation and our competition, for example, I realize that we have a FDI cap of 26%, correct? But at the same time, the news aggregators, those who take the news from our newspapers and put it on a digital platform, they have no cap. In fact, current news aggregators are owned and funded by the Chinese company. And you are surprised to see when those for 59 were banned, and these Chinese-owned news where they are interfering in the news in the country, they've been let alone, So I guess if government really looks at this sector from a news perspective, that how we can balance the regulation. I'm not saying no to regulation. I'm very happy with the regulation. And unfortunately, our format gives a 24 hours time to the editor to verify the news. Unlike any other platform where the guy, goes live and say whatever he wants to say. In our case, the editor gets a chance to say, show me your source of a reporter and then verify the news and all that. So we're very happy with the regulation, but at the same time, we expect government to understand that those news aggregators and other platforms, they also need to be regulated. So it's a level playing field, as you mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Girish. I think that's a very critical point, looking at what is allowed, because when we started looking at FDI in newspaper in the 90s, I remember the kind of debates which used to happen, and 2 or 3 media barons were leading the fight for it, but still we haven't really got to where we should. I mean, radio is an example of that. When you have podcasts open everywhere, there's no reason why domestic FM radio should not have news. But we have come to close to the end of the session. But what I would do, I'd like to come back to Mr. Khare, because several thoughts were raised, which I'm sure he'd like to respond to. Mr. Khare, with your thoughts, after your thoughts, we'll close the session. But any responses that to the ideas raised by the panelists?
A number of suggestions, ideas, they have been raised. I'll respond to three main ones. One, about declaring this industry as infrastructure. So this was raised by the chairman of the broadcast committee, and also by, I think it has been in discussion for the last more than a year or so. Let me tell you that Ministry of INB is fully supportive of this proposal. In fact, we took it to Ministry of Finance. The only Ministry of Finance also does not have much objection to it, except for definitions. And somehow during this COVID period, or maybe the discussion got lost in between. But I would request a small committee of FICCI could meet our officers here, because what Ministry of Finance wants to know, what exactly is that infrastructure? Is a studio infrastructure? Is a transmission tower infrastructure? I mean, how do you define the various elements of the infrastructure? So that perhaps a small group of our ministry and FICCI Broadcast Committee could sit together. The proposal has already been supported by the ministry, by our ministry, and also finance is in favor, except for Niti Aayog is also in favor, except for this definition part. So this is a very doable thing. And if we sit together and find out what exactly will qualify for the infrastructure status, then I think this proposal can be moved on. A second very important point which came out was, and which I fully agree, that the pace at which technology changes or develops is far greater than the pace at which the regulations are made or the laws are made. So definitely there is always a gap between the regulations and the technology. I was, along with the officers, our ministry officials, we have seen the Singapore model. What they have done is to have one structure, and they are providing what is the no-go area. So after you, if you are not in the no-go area, everything is open. So that you don't have to change the regulation every time the technology changes, because the regulation is as per the no-go of the content and not as per the technology. So that is one idea, but it is still at the idea stage. The third about the print media, and print has emerged as a very important sector, because ultimately what is quoted, I mean, if you want to discuss something between India and China, people are quoting Global Times. And I'm sure if they are providing access to our newspapers, they must be quoting the Indian side also. So print media, particularly in the regional languages, and now even because of the technology, even the smaller languages, smaller in the sense those who have less number of speakers or readers, even they are coming out with a weekly paper or something for their information of their groups. So print does have a very important role in communicating the views. What we see in the TV or in the other, say, digital media, they are primarily about the immediate concerns or the small piece of news. But print is the one which actually collates things together, right from, say, 1962 to 67 to 2020, and then brings out a perspective as to how things have developed. So this role of print media is bound to continue. Of course, the point that you raised about 26% FDI, I will not like to announce it here. It's not my role, but there is a very serious thinking that the level playing field should be there between the print media and the digital platforms. But of course, the announcement will come after the decision is finally taken by the government, but this is a very valid point. So I'll stop with these three reactions. One, about the FDI, yes, 26% should be applicable to the aggregators as well as to the print media. About the infrastructure status, which we have already supported, but we do need to have some fine-tuning. And third, about the pace of technology, and technology, the way it is growing, I think if we start regulating everything, we'll end up by regulating nothing. We will not know, how many regulations and acts and rules we have. So some model where we prescribe the minimum and then leave everything to the organizations. Beyond that minimum, they can do whatever they feel is appropriate. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Khare. I think it's heartening to know that a lot of progressive thoughts are in the minds of policymakers like yours. So I think we have to, be ready for change at a pace that we can't perhaps assimilate ourselves, both within the industry and within the government policymakers and regulators, because to build on what Shekhar said, creativity cannot be contained. And we cannot perhaps anticipate what's going to happen even in the next 6 months in terms of technological changes. So whether it's augmented reality or co-creation, things will happen. And it's up to us to be ready to be able to manage and make the most of it. To all of you who joined us, thank you very much for joining this session. I'd like to close it and hand it over back to Vicky.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pranjal. Thank you to the panel. That was a wonderful session. We have the next session starting in some time. The next session is going to be the role of creative economy in nation building. We're waiting for Mr. Amit and Mr. Ajit Mohan to join us.